Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. Really glad to have you here. We've got quite a few people here in the audience already. We're just gonna give another minute or so to let those folks trickle in. Hey, and we've got more and more people arriving, which is great. So we'll go ahead and get started with the introductions. So like I said before, welcome to today's webinar. We're really excited to have you guys here and really excited about our topic today. We are going to be talking about navigating LEED version 5. So all of you in the audience have probably heard quite a lot about this new version of the world's most popular green building certification scheme. And we're excited to share with you some of the proposed changes, what you can expect, what this means for the marketplace, and some ways that you can comply with the new certification. Now, I am joined today by an awesome panel. So we've got Surubala Sa, who is with USGBC Texas. She is also the Senior Sustainability Strategist at Gensler. And we're also joined by David McLean, and he is another board member with USGBC Texas. As well, he is the Chief Impact Officer and partner at ESG Impacts. And so you'll hear from both of them. They'll give a little introduction about themselves and their backgrounds, but they are both very involved in the sustainability construction sector in the sort of green building world. So really excited to have you guys both here with us today. And we also have Spencer Jarrett on the call, and he is an LCA expert with One Click LCA. And he's going to help you guys understand some more about how you can comply with the new LCA requirements in LEED version 5. Now, before we get started with the webinar, I'd love to hear where you are all from. So if you want to jump into the chat, say hello, let us know who you are and where you're joining from. We have an audience all over the world, and I love seeing sort of what state, what city, what country you guys are from. Now, today's webinar is brought to you by One Click LCA. We are the world's leading platform for LCA and EPD creation for construction and manufacturing. We have our software lets AEC professionals have access to the world's largest LCA database with over 250,000 data sets. We have over 20 integrations with the most popular AEC softwares like Revit, Rhino, and Grasshopper. We're used in over 170 countries, and we've been in business for over 20 years, powering the makers of a zero carbon future, which is all of you guys. So thank you again for joining us. Now, we've got quite a few responses. We've got some folks from Texas, Vancouver, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Washington, D.C., Denver, Alabama, North Carolina. So people from all over, we've got some Seattle, San Francisco, people from all over the U.S. and Canada. So really great to have you guys all here. Now, to get a little more information, this will help us guide the webinar today and just sort of see who you guys are in the audience. We'd like to know what industry sector you are working in. So I am going to put up a poll, and you can just go ahead and answer. Now, if you are in AEC, manufacturing, or if you are a consultant, you can tell us. If you are in some other industry that we haven't listed, please do go in the chat and let us know which segment you are in. And I'm seeing the results come in. We'll give those a couple more minutes, but right now it looks like most of you are in the AEC industry, which is fairly expected since LEED does concern AEC professionals quite a bit, and then we've got quite a few consultants with us today. So great to have you. And now, without further ado, we'll get to the meat of our program, and Surabala, take it away.
Hello, everyone. This is Surabala signing in from Houston, Texas. I am a senior sustainability strategist with Gensler. I had communications with USGBC Texas, who is our partner today to bring in the event to you guys. And I also am a co-founder and chair of Carbon Leadership Forum's Houston chapter. If you would like to connect with me, I think the QR code goes to my LinkedIn page, Aline. Yes, okay. Today we will be talking about a brief introduction about LEED V5, what it is about, a little overview of what we should expect from the next version of LEED, and we will be going into more nuances and in-depth understanding about the embodied carbon associated prerequisites and credits that we will expect in LEED V5. If you haven't heard about LEED V5 as yet, and you are completely new to it, please go ahead and scan the QR code just to give you a little more review and resources that you can use to understand more about what's coming in. But LEED V5, in an overall perspective, is going to be a huge move and a transition to get the market to the higher demands that we have today in the market with regards to accountability of our green building practices. And it's going to help us make a little more comprehensive framework for green building practices. Historically, LEED has been in the forefront of making the key changes and implementing key important building practices as it associated to sustainability throughout the decades that it has been with the market. The last update that we had with LEED V5 was back in 2014. So this is after 10 years that LEED V5 is being released. But this will, of course, be focusing on the aspects that it had in LEED V4, but it's going to be including imperatives with regards to decarbonization, ecosystem conservation, restoration, equity, health, and resilience. So it's going to be a bigger and a broader framework, and it's going to be looking into much more in-depth and vast aspects, so to say. This was introduced to everyone last year in Greenbuild. And well, to that point, this year's Green Build is actually next week. So we're literally a year since this was introduced. LEED V5 was then open for public comments back in April for the first round of comments. And then in September for the second round of comments that actually got over end of October. So we have, it has already had the public review sessions, and now it's going to be in the verge of finalizing to release it in early 2025. So like mentioned in the initial introduction, that it's going to be looking at three major impact areas: decarbonization, quality of life, and ecological conservation and restoration. And all of these will be having its associated credit categories and credit requirements that you will see in a bit. And as just mentioned, that the last LEED was released in 2014, and it's almost 10 plus years gap since then. From now on, LEED will be getting version update every 5 years. So in 2025, we will hear about LEED version 5. By 2030, we will have LEED version 6, and it's gonna keep going in 5 year uh, um, durations. Um, of course, it will have building design and construction, interior design and construction focus with regards to all the three major impact areas. But it's also going to be going very extensive on existing buildings. As they say, a lot of the buildings that we would need is already existing, and the operations and maintenance is really the effort to make those existing buildings more sustainable and more efficient for its long-term use. So you will see heavy focus for LEED V5 in both design, construction, and operations and maintenance. This is a brief uh, overview of how the various categories and credits going to look like. Of course, if you want to go through each one of them, you can log into your LEED account, and you will be able to see LEED V5 details for each of the credits right away. But this is for building design and construction and interior design and construction. And today, with regards to our embodied carbon conversation, we will be only focusing on these two today. Um, like I said, it's going to go pretty heavy with regards to decarbonization, and both with regards to operational carbon, embodied carbon, and transportation carbon. So, of course, today we are really focusing on the embodied carbon credit and prerequisites. So what you see on the screen is the credits associated to the decarbonization impact area. And what you see highlighted is really the credits. The first one is a prerequisite. The second one is also a prerequisite. And both of them are required for all LEED V5 projects. And we will be going through the exact requirements of these. And of course, then there are optional credits for building materials reuse perspective. And then we will have some credit requirements with regards to reducing embodied carbon overall in your project. So this is what we will be focusing on for the next few minutes. So what you see on the screen is the first prerequisite with regards to carbon assessment. Now, this is actually part of the integrative process, if you will, of LEED, which has been there since a long time, but carbon assessment will become a part of that prerequisite. And the requirement really is to make sure that we are looking at energy use and operational carbon projection. We will be needing to have fundamental refrigerant management, assess and quantify embodied carbon, which we will be just discussing about, and transportation demand management. So coming to assessing and quantifying embodied carbon, now this is also a prerequisite under the material category. Now, what is this talking about is really reporting embodied carbon. It is not yet just talking about optimizing it, but it is really talking about reporting embodied carbon. Now, what on earth is embodied carbon? And what does it mean when you see on the screen the language that it has, quantifying embodied carbon impacts, the global warming potential of the structure, enclosure, hardscape materials of the project? Now, to understand what exactly is embodied carbon and global warming potential. Embodied carbon is really the carbon that is associated to the life cycle of a product from its raw material stage till the demolition and everything that happens in between. And in order, the way that the carbon associated with the entire life cycle is reported is through something called global warming potential. And when embodied carbon is really a generic term for that particular global warming potential value, which is usually expressed in terms of kg or tons, CO2 equivalent for that particular product or building. Um, so embodied carbon is really um, global warming potential is the unit and the way embodied carbon is reported. So what the language is talking about is really that you quantify embodied carbon impact for the structure, enclosure, and hardscape material of the project. Of course, this is for building design and construction. This will also be applicable for interior design and construction, which we will be talking about in a bit. So it also talks about quantifying the cradle to gate data only. Now, what is cradle to gate? What is A1 to A3 is when we want to understand embodied carbon in the entirety. Like we said, embodied carbon is associated from the raw material stage of the project till the demolition. So A1 to A3 is really uh, the very prelim stage of that particular product, and that is the raw material, the transport of that raw material to the manufacturing facility, and the manufacturing process itself. And all carbon associated to that is termed as cradle to gate. And that is what the language is referring to, is we need to quantify the cradle to gate, that is A1 to A3 part of the emissions only. Of course, the emissions doesn't stop there, but LEED is not making that as a part of the prerequisite reporting. So going to for building design and construction, the scope is structure, enclosure, and hardscapes. For interior scope, it's going to be gypsum, wallboard, flooring, insulation, wood composites, wall flooring, ceiling, concrete, metals, paints, and coatings. So it's going to be having an extensive overall purview when it comes to embodied carbon of both architecture and interior projects, and it is taking in account all the major material that it would want us to assess. Now, the prerequisite is what we need to do for all projects. Then there is a step forward. In the prerequisite, we only reported embodied carbon. Here, we will be making an attempt to optimize embodied carbon, and that is something that they are giving 4 options per se to reduce, optimize, and then report. And of course, there are thresholds associated to the number of credits you get with the optimization, but whole building lifecycle assessment is one of the option. We can also report this with regards to EPD analysis and an averaging, like an averaging approach for the project, and or you can have that with the EPD analysis, like we would do for with EC3, and then it is also talking about the A5 stage, that is the construction associated emissions. So of course, the different thresholds will give you different credits, and upfront this can look like little overwhelming, but as you dive deep, this will be something that we will all be practicing as we move towards LEED V5. Now, it is talking about, so when it's talking about reduction to what is what we need to also understand, and that is called the baseline aspect. Now, 10% reduction from the baseline, the way it defines the baseline is the same materials that you are optimizing, comparing it with its material baseline information. Now that comes from a collaboration and a nonprofit called Carbon Leadership Forum. There is something called Carbon Leadership Forum Material Baseline Report that looks something like this. And they have the report, I mean, this report gets revised every 2 years. So right now we are with 2023 version. And what the baseline reference does is it is giving the number that based on the industry-wide research, they are declaring it to be the average that the industry is using, and the percentage reduction needs to be from this number. So, like I said, the organization Carbon Leadership Forum, they have been doing extensive research, education, outreach, policy making, and benchmarking, and working on the baselining of data. And they are right now in the North American in North America and LATAM. It is the only source of baselines that exist in the industry today. Of course, other than for concrete, there is the Concrete Association. Now, the value that CLF is talking about is the value that you would see in an EPD. Now, the environmental product declaration is where you find your global warming potential for A1 to A3. And that particular number needs to be what should be either less than or equal to the number that you find in the CLF baseline. Um, little uh, little outside of the LEED overview, um, and the main impact which my friend and colleague David will be talking very soon about, um, the idea of LEED becoming robust with regards to reporting and optimization of embodied carbon is really to move the industry in that direction, and help the industry kind of work towards optimization and better data. And the similar aspect of something similar to this is something that Gensler is doing across North America, Canada, Europe, and LATAM region, and that is called Gensler Product Sustainability Standards. It's a standard that has been developed with alignment with the Carbon Leadership Forum and other building standards. And what it is doing is major products that Gensler as a company primarily specifies, we are providing carbon associated, health associated, environmental quality associated thresholds. And that is really something that is helping move. We are working with the manufacturers to kind of move the industry in that direction. And my friend David will be talking about the manufacturer's perspective of it, on how this is actually moving the market in the direction that we want it to move. That kind of concludes my part of the presentation. Again, if you want to learn more about LEED V5, you should scan that, and it will take you to the resources page that will give you a lot of good content with regards to LEED V5. And finally, the particular webinar is brought to you in partnership with USGBC Texas. David and I are proactively, working with USGBC Texas, and um, we are really it's a volunteer-based organization which is working with the community to make a more healthier and safer built environment all through. And we heavily engage with training, events and at state and local level advocacy for various green building perspectives. And it's again a volunteer based organization. If you want to connect with us, we do heavy training sessions with regards to LEED, with regards to any pressing concerns or conversation that is happening in and across Texas. And um, if you want to connect with us, go ahead and scan that code with that, David.
Thank you very much, Sarabella. So my name's David McLean. I am one of the founding board members of USGBC Texas. I rolled off of that a few years ago and started the USGBC Texas's Best Practices Committee. And the Best Practices Committee, I have the privilege of working with very passionate and professional individuals. I call them marketplace visionaries and best practice champions to accelerate the deployment of sustainable best practices, be they designs, technologies, policies, or investments in the places we live, learn, work, and play. I'm also a partner with our firm ESG Impacts. I am the chief impact assurance officer. We are a full service real estate consulting firm, everything from real estate appraisal to brokerage through the building science part to make sure that our clients' investments are creating assets that aren't just financially better, but also creating human and environmental benefits also. So what I want to talk about, Sarabella did a great job in talking about what has to happen on LEED 5. Spencer's going to talk about how to do it. I'm going to talk about why to do it from the business case perspective. So, because at the end of the day, money will always be the problem in implementing any of these initiatives. So we have to figure out how to make money the solution. And the reality of it is that in business, opportunities missed are burdens gained. And for those of you that are out there and looking at the list of participants, it looks like the predominant number on this today are architects, but I see some manufacturers and a good splash of consultants too. So this is just a quick look at what is happening, what the opportunity is. We think a lot about cities, municipalities driving LEED certification, but the private sector has huge opportunity to create assets that actually are more generationally responsible. So the built environment ecosystem, we throw that term around a lot, so we wanted to make sure that everybody was on board with what that meant. These were all man-made structures, features, and facilities viewed collectively as the environment in which we live, learn, work, and play. Some of you might be engaged in that today. And the stakeholders and shareholders. And when I say stakeholders, this is anybody that is engaged in those places we live, learn, work, and play. But the shareholders are those that invest in, the money that goes into the buildings and communities we're creating. So as taxpayers, theoretically, we're shareholders in the communities that we build. I also want to mention that all of this has to go hand in hand with the natural ecosystems upon which we encroach and alter as we create buildings and communities. This point will come up later. So this is the life cycle stages. I saw in the chat there was a question about why is it just A1 through A3. You can't see my cursor, but if you look over on the far left-hand side, you'll see A1, A2, A3. The A1's extraction from the ground, A2 is the transport to the manufacturer, and A3. We have a lot of good data here. So this is the start of a journey. So the environmental product declarations right now, we have some really good data. If you look at the LEED rating system, the way the LEED has evolved over the years, when it becomes a prerequisite, it's pretty much relatively easy to achieve and do with the tools that are available. And so the Rest of the tools, so if you look at A1, A2, and A3, the cradle to gate, that's really the materials that we're going to put into the buildings. The rest of that is the means and methods. How do we actually construct it? How do we operate it? How do we deconstruct it? And what do we do with all those pieces at the end of that? So we hear about transparency and accountability. At the very opening comment, it was noted that LEED is a market-driven deal, and the marketplace will always decide on what happens, how fast it happens, and around that, we need transparency and accountability. Those terms get thrown out a lot. They're not the same thing. Transparency is a commitment to ethical practices that foster trust and reliability of information and data. And I love the term, I can't remember where I heard it years ago, but change happens at the speed of trust. And if that really hit home with me, everything that we do is we have to create trust in moving anything forward. Accountability, on the other hand, are the means by which individuals and organizations report to a recognized authority and are held responsible for those actions. So the other thing I want to talk about today, and if you take away anything from what I'm saying here, is understanding the lowest first cost minimum code paradigm. In the built environment ecosystem, the fiduciary model that is pervasive there is that our maximum expectation is the lowest minimum requirement. Let me just say that again for emphasis. The maximum expectation of the buildings and communities we create is the lowest minimum requirement. Anything that costs more or is different will always be compared against that lowest first cost minimum code. So you have to be able to not only talk about what the benefits are in a philosophical method and have good renderings, but you have to be able to talk about the business case. And that's what we're focused on with the best practice champions committee within USGBC Texas. So transparency and accountability, if you look down on the left, I can't show my cursor, but the lowest first cost minimum code, that's lowest first cost LMC down there. This is what we build every day. 90% of the buildings out there are built to the lowest first cost minimum code, although I don't know any architects that get out of bed every morning wanting to build a lowest first cost minimum code project, but we succeed 10% of the time. So what we're asking about here today, we're put LEED V5 in perspective, transparency increases to the right, to the arrow there. We have things that we're talking about today at a micro scale, environmental product declarations, life cycle assessments, and we have tools like One Click LCA that allow us to be able to create that level of confidence in the transparency that we're creating. We also have macro things like environmental social justice, DEI, and sustainable development goals. I don't know. All these are designed to minimize greenwashing. My fear is, my comment on the latest election, that we'll have more green stalling. But the reality of it is that businesses are deploying these because what? They increase the return on investment. Businesses and buildings that have LEED certifications get lower insurance costs, they get lower cost of money, they get better rates. Rating agencies like S&P and Moody's have the historical data that shows that these buildings don't default on loans as much. They have higher lease rates. All of these things add up to a business case. So though you may hear some green stalling, that's just people putting off what they're saying going to do. The reality of it is these are baked into the business decisions now of most entities. Let's look at accountability. Transparency goes one axis, accountability the next. We have things like, I can't get my cursor to go here. So we have mandatory and voluntary policies. These are things like government building codes, public policy, local codes, utility incentives, leaderships. There's all kinds of stuff out there that's driving the business case for them. And we have entities that are stepping up here. Buy Clean America's highlighted, but right in our backyard, we have Austin Green Building Programs. These are all drivers for doing something better than the lowest first cost minimum code paradigm. Then we have voluntary green rating systems like LEED 5 we're talking about today, but LEED is ingrained and recognized as the world's most predominant green rating system. They're voluntary. So what's the incentive to do something better? Again, back to those business case deals that I talked about. And then we have industry specific programs like the Gensler product sustainability standards. I just pulled this one out because it was relatable to a client of ours. ESG Impacts creates EPDs. We do life cycle assessments, triple bottom line cost benefit analysis, all the things that create assurance that the investment in this initiative over and above the lowest first cost minimum code is going to be realized for the life of the assessment. And that is what life cycle assessment is all about, is proving that what you're doing, putting money in, is actually getting you return. If you look down at the bottom of this particular standard, Gensler standard is for ceiling tiles that you have to have a manufacturer take back program. That's not a requirement of LEED. There are parallels, but there are different accelerations of different accountability and transparency mechanisms. I know for a fact that by Gensler putting this in, that Rock Wool, which is a global manufacturer of insulation and has a recycling program called Rock Cycle, has introduced through their Rock Fawn ceiling tile manufacturing, that they've introduced that global program into the US specifically because I went the wrong way, because of this little note down here. So there's a lot of influence that happens simultaneously and in conjunction and augments the LEED rating system. Very quickly through the rest of this, I think I have, here we go. So market forces are going to drive the speed at which, you know, all of this stuff happens. LEED V5, LEED V6, sustainability standards, there's all kinds of stuff out there. And, you can see what's happening across, the US on who's putting in programs for higher levels of transparency and accountability. But you can't have accountability. You can have all kinds of transparency tools, but if you don't have accountability programs that are actually asking for them, the market's not going to drive. Simultaneously, you can have all kinds of accountability mechanisms, but if you don't have the accountability tools to actually create that level of trust, you're not going to have the acceleration that you want. We're at a very interesting time in the marketplace now where the tools available like One Click LCA, like the Gensler standard for accountability are matching, and the marketplace is demanding this. With the whole COVID crisis, the occupant reentry confidence levels, a lot of brown assets having to get refinanced. These are all things that are having the investors and the banks and those that control the money, right? Because this is all about money, want a higher level of assurance. They want minimized risk and maximum return on investment. So that's what's driving. So where's this all going? You hear net zero out there. Net zero is nice. Then it's going to be net positive. In reality, sorry if this hurts anybody's feelings, but LEED version 6 is not going to be the last thing that happens. And EPDs A1 through A3 cradle to gate is just the start of having to do a whole cradle to grave analysis on not just your building, but the manufacturers that are providing this. I was at a low carbon concrete forum 2 weeks ago here in Houston, held by the National Ready Mix Foundation. And I know this from clients that I have that are doing EPDs. 4 or 5 years ago, people couldn't spell EPD. The Ready Mix Foundation has already 7,800 EPDs for their manufacturers, because if you look at the prerequisite for LEED V5, what's the biggest contributor to carbon in that building? It's concrete. So the market is reacting because they have to react, but they also know that if they don't know how their material is going to actually be evaluated, the lenses that are going onto it, they cannot make long-term decisions on their businesses. This is all about business sustainability as much as it is about building sustainability. So the only constant is change. Sorry if that offends anybody. We talked about EPD today's life cycle assessment. There are other things out there that are equally as important and will gain more momentum. We have health product declarations. It's not just about carbon, although carbon is a health impact. We also have emerging things like the resilient product declaration that ESG Impacts is working with the Future Proof in America. This is directly related to the insurance industry and the reinsurance industry pulling out of resiliency zones. The federal government identified 283 at-risk resiliency zones, and insurance companies want a level of assurance that if you build the building with these materials and in this way, they will insure it. So there is a market demand that is driving a need for resilient product declaration. So again, think about everything that's happening here, and it's the journey, not the destination. So I'll turn it over to Spencer.
Thanks, David. So to wrap things up here, I just want to talk more specifically about how you can do an LCA with One Click LCA. And I see a lot of familiar names here on the attendees list, but for those of you that I don't know, my name is Spencer Jarrett, and I help look after the US and Canadian markets at One Click LCA. So before we get into a high-level overview of the process of gathering the data and doing an LCA with One Click LCA, just a quick recap on kind of who we are and what we do. So One Click LCA is mainly a tech company in the form of software tools. We work with manufacturers to make EPDs, but today we'll just stick with talking about buildings. And One Click LCA is a cloud-based software. So you can use it from anywhere and collaborate with your teams online. You can also do lifecycle cost assessments at scale. So you can compare the GWP in kilograms of CO2e versus the dollar for individual materials or entire design options. And we integrate with pretty much every BIM tool that's out there, as well as just a normal Excel-based bill of material that you can import into the software. And one last thing to mention here is we have a specific calculation tool in One Click LCA for LEED. So we have one that's been around for a while for LEED V4. We'll have one for V5 once everything is clarified. But you toggle a button on the software and it will guide you through the steps of doing a LEED LCA, tell you if you're missing specific materials that might be required for LEED. And then at the end, it will provide you a report comparing your baseline versus your proposed LCA design option, and including the graphs of how you actually made those reductions. And one last thing before we get into an overview of the process, I just want to highlight the data, because the data is arguably the most important part of doing an LCA or just a basic embodied carbon assessment. So in One Click LCA in North America, basically what we've done is consolidated all publicly available EPDs into one database. We also have included many other reputable generic material databases, and we have an in-house data engineering team that produces material data sets for you to use when there aren't many EPDs out there. So in North America, you have about 150,000 North American specific data points that you can utilize in your LCAs. All right, so let's get into some of the steps of creating a baseline. Everything from this point on will mainly focus on path 1 of the proposed credit for LEED V5, which involves making a baseline and then finding reductions from that baseline. So what is the baseline? I see a couple of questions came through the chat about how to come up with a baseline. What does it represent? Maybe if you're not in the US. In general, a baseline building needs to be the same size and have the same function as your end building that is actually built. So you can't make a baseline that is extra large and then come up with a proposed design that is much smaller to show reductions in the carbon impact. And you can't make your baseline with materials that you wouldn't normally use outside of your market, so that you can easily, come up with a better proposed baseline. Baseline needs to match the way you would normally build the building in your geographical market with the traditional materials. And this really simply explains what an LCA is. There's two main variables to this. One are the material quantities. So for LEED V5, that will be for the BDC structure, at least it will be the core and shell of the building, the envelope, and any hardscapes. So we need to know the quantities of all those materials in the project. We're going to take those quantities and multiply them by the environmental impact of each material. And to do that, we need EPDs. So here I've gone and listed kind of the step-by-step of how you would go about performing an LCA. So we need to come up with the quantities of the materials. We need to choose a life cycle period, the proposed lifetime of the building, which is 60 years in LEED V4. And we need to kind of lock in the geometry of the building design so that we are not creating a baseline that is much larger than the end product. And then we need to collect the material information. So the material information is probably the first thing that you'll be doing. And there's a number of different ways to source the information depending on what stage of design or even construction that you're in. So I did see one question come into the chat about if One Click LCA can provide a baseline for LEED, and the answer is yes. On the screen here, we have some screenshots from a conceptual carbon modeling tool that we have called Carbon Designer 3D. Basically, you input the dimensions of the building, the floors, the gross floor area, and then you can assign industry average EPDs to each building element and start generating a baseline in that way. There's some other ways to come up with a baseline and gather those material quantities. You can derive them from a BIM model. If you've gone ahead and modeled anything in Revit or Tekla or whatever it may be, you can take all of your modeled elements and put them into One Click. You can also do the same with just a simple material takeoff from an Excel file. And you can combine those data sources so you're not excluding any materials you want to have in there. So this is just a screenshot of a bill of materials that was extracted from a Revit model using One Click LCA. So the overall theme of gathering the data is really that we need to know 4 things about each material. Its classification, so what part of the building is it on? The material name, ideally as specific as possible, because in the software, what One Click will do is recognize the name, and the more specific you are, the more easily the software will match your material to the most representative EPD. But you still need to go back and double check all of this just to make sure you're being as accurate as possible. And then of course the quantity and the unit of those quantities. So using an Excel file is a very common way to derive an LCA and get started in One Click. The other most common way is to use a Revit model, which basically does the same thing process-wise, but rather than quantities in the Excel file, we're taking it from the modeled building. So once you've pulled in your material information from a Revit file, from an Excel file into One Click, you then have the ability to customize the level of detail in the LCA. Maybe if it's very early on, you don't know all of these details, but you do have the ability to dial in different parameters, such as the transportation distance of each material, multiple legs of that transportation journey, the vehicle it was shipped on. You can also include things like the end-of-life scenario assumptions for each material, and also if the material needs to be repaired, replaced, or refurbished before the end of life of the whole building, you can notate that within One Click LCA. So once you've input that information, we've dialed in our parameters. You can see in One Click LCA what some of the most impactful materials are right off the bat. This is just kind of the low-hanging fruit of your design. And you can work down this list and start comparing your materials or design options to other options that you may be considering, maybe considering a different plant from the same manufacturer to source from. That's less impactful, or maybe a completely different manufacturer of the same product. One thing to note is just to be careful when comparing EPDs because they're not all made with the same rules. So just something to keep in mind, but you can read all of the full EPDs from One Click. And then lastly, you can run an automated report for your LEED LCA. And it's a formal report that a lot of our clients use to gain the credits or provide other stakeholders of what that baseline building LCA looked like, and then the necessary actions that were taken to actually reduce the impact across the impact categories. So that's a huge time saver, and you can also export all of the EPDs from your design all at once, and it will be emailed straight to you. So you have that documentation as well for the other credits that require the material documentation or the EPD optimization. So that was really quick, really high level overview. If you want to know more, please reach out to us. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to you, Aileen.
Yeah, great. So thank you so much. Thank you to all of you for your insights. We do have a few questions. You guys were able to answer some as you were presenting, which was great, and some were answered in the chat, but we still have a few to go through. Before we get to the live Q&A though, if you are in the audience and you just heard everything you did along with Spencer's high-level overview, if you'd like a more personalized demo of the One Click LCA solution, I'm going to put a poll up on the screen. And so if you want us to contact you to book a free personalized demo, click yes. And we will reach out to you directly and get that tailored demo. We can figure out, what is your exact situation and how we can help you with your LEED V5 certification. And now to get into the live Q&A part, let me minimize this screen so we can see everybody. So we have a few questions. It looks like some more are coming in, so I'll monitor those. But to start with, one of the questions was about resiliency product declarations, which, David, I think that you touched on. Are these being carried out already? And if yes, which organizations? Are they third-party validated like EPDs, or are they sort of something for the future?
So these are for the future, but we are doing that analysis already. So if you look at a full whole life cycle EPD, you have to put in the resiliency part of it. How long is that material going to be used? This is part of the means and methods of construction. There's materials, means, and methods when you think about it, what we're bringing to the table. But we are developing these RPDs a little bit different than other green rating systems, where the industry, the marketplace, is demanding something that they can assign a level of relief to. Whereas typical green rating systems have grown from the bottom up. This is more from a specific industry top down. They want that level of assurance that if you build this building like this, or you build this community like this, that it's going to withstand, be it termites or hurricanes or lava flows, whatever it is, unnatural events that seem to be happening lately. So stay tuned. If you want more information, please reach out to me.
Great, thank you for that. The next question is more specifically about One Click LCA. Spencer, you'll probably want to take this one. Are the One Click LCA LEED reports accepted for LEED submission in place of a credit form?
I can answer that because I submitted. One Click, actually a few months ago, now we have an option of generating a report with a reference to a baseline. So you can actually export your final LEED proposed report with a reference to the baseline, and that kind of covers everything that you need for a LEED documentation perspective, and that can be uploaded as part of your LEED credit documentation, if that
Excellent.
helps. Yeah.
Thank you. Straight from a source who's done it, so that's perfect.
Do it daily.
And now we have another question about when deriving quantities from a Revit model, are there minimum model requirements, like a level of design or entirely in 3D, that are required to successfully get material quantities for an LCA?
I would say level of detail of 4 and above. I think that helps get accurate quantities, because if it is, well, if you haven't modeled it, if it's a 2D information, of course, there is no way the software will magically understand it. So it has to be modeled, and I think an LOD 4 and above should be able to help you with a good quantity, good quality data extraction from Revit to One Click. And another thing, one very important thing to note there is the nomenclature of the Revit families, because One Click is trying to understand the name that you have given to the particular families and sub-materials within it. If you mention concrete as not concrete and something default, there is a high chance that it did not get read correctly, because there was no identification for One Click to understand what's the use of that material.
Great, thank you. And then we have one last question, which is what other baselines can be used outside of the US? So since CLF is pretty US centric, are there any other resources aside from CLF?
RICS, I would say, would be a place to go for European market. Again, we'll have to dive in more, but Spencer, do you want to respond?
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. I think RICS has a lot of guidance out there for baselines, but I'm not sure where exactly these questions are coming from. But yeah, RICS is the one I was going to say as well.
Yeah, we're following the levels.
Yeah, the levels
scenario right now in coming out of France. It's an interesting way of looking at the impact of carbon and creating baselines. This is, again, a journey. The baselines have to be marketplace representative, not out of everybody's reach. We have to recognize where we're at, right? And we want everybody to be on this journey with us, so we don't make that baseline so unattainable that people just say this is crazy. So that's important.
Yeah, so great. Thank you guys for those answers. Now we have one last question, which is asking for your contact information. So if you guys wouldn't mind jumping into the chat and just putting the best way to contact you in there so that everyone can get a hold of you, have more of these conversations in the future. And once again, we also got some comments in the chat that I noted, some comments about sort of customer feedback, how we can help you guys better. So I have noted those, and we will take those to the broader team so that we're always looking for feedback. We want to make sure our tool is the most helpful to you guys as possible. So we will take those into consideration. And then before we go, I just want to say thank you for your insights. Thank you for your expertise. This was a really interesting webinar full of information. And of course, we will see what the official guidelines look like when they're published. If any of you in the audience will be at Greenbuild next week, One Click LCA will be there as well. We're in booth 1101, so come and see us. We will be there for the full conference, so we're excited to have more of these conversations in person. And then lastly, I would like to invite you all to join our Winter Sustainability Summit. This is going to be streamed on December 5th. We are going to be talking about low carbon materials. So if you are thinking about what type of materials you can use in your LEED V5 certified low carbon building project, join the summit. There's going to be a lot of really interesting discussions in the low carbon materials marketplace. And with that, thank you again so much for your time. And I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.